Now, in a dramatic show of solidarity, the U.S. President Joe Biden will travel to Israel on Wednesday. The visit is aimed at showing support for the U.S. ally. The much-anticipated visit comes amid concerns that the Israel-Hamas war could become a larger regional conflict. After Israel, Biden will then go to Jordan to meet with Arab leaders. The visit poses a multitude of challenges for the White House, ranging from politics to security concerns. Biden's visit comes as the U.S. is working with the Israelis to eliminate Hamas, while also pressing for ways to ease the humanitarian suffering in Gaza that is worsening with every passing day. The United Nations World Food Programme say the food situation in blockaded Gaza Strip is becoming dire, with only 4 or 5 days of stocks left. The Biden's visit will give fresh leverage to influence events on the ground and bolster his image at home. But Biden's trip is also fraught with risks, both political and physical. Even as the White House is leaving no stone unturned to safeguard the Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Armed Forces, the Pentagon is stationing 2 aircraft carriers and their supporting ships in the Eastern Mediterranean. The Gerald R. Ford carrier, along with supporting ships, arrived in the Eastern Mediterranean early last week. It is America's newest aircraft carrier and the world's largest, with more than 5,000 sailors. The Pentagon has also directed the Dwight Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group to move to the Eastern Mediterranean. It will take between a week and a half to reach the region. Much like the Ford, the carrier will be accompanied by other ships like the guided missile cruiser Philippine Sea, guided missile destroyers Gravely and Mason. The ships are meant to be a deterrent to ensure the conflict does not expand. The U.S. is aiming to prevent the conflict from spreading. Equally, it is trying to safeguard its interests in Israel, a region that already hosts a number of U.S. military ships, planes, and even troops. U.S. defense officials say that the U.S. military has selected roughly 2,000 troops to prepare for a potential deployment to support Israel. Pentagon asserts that they are not intended to serve in a combat role, nor infantry has been put on to prepare or deploy order. But on the ground, things are volatile. The security risks of a diplomatic visit to Israel were on display on Monday when Blinken, in his meeting with Netanyahu, was forced to abruptly take shelter after air sirens warned of incoming rockets. Similar scenes were witnessed when other world leaders visited Israel. On Wednesday, British Foreign Secretary James Cleverly had to rush into a shelter as a siren went off. On Friday, EU chief Ursula von der Leyen ran into a shelter as sirens blared in Tel Aviv. All eyes will be on the skies in Tel Aviv when Biden reaches Tel Aviv. Biden will also travel to Jordan to meet King Abdullah II, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. In recent days, Blinken has met separately with the 3 leaders, all of whom have condemned the situation in Gaza. Clearly, Biden's visit is fraught with risks, but it is a risk which he has to take. His task is cut out to demonstrate the rock-solid support of the U.S. for its long-standing ally Israel, and also to ensure that there is a semblance of relief for the Gazans. There is also the pressing question of an impending ground assault by Israeli forces and the fate of hostages. The Arab nations are keeping their cards close to the chest. A wait-and-watch game of high stakes. The big question, can Biden defuse the situation? So this is a high-stakes visit by the President of the United States, Joe Biden. According to experts and analysts, they say that this bears 2 risks, political and physical. We saw what happened to Antony Blinken. We also saw what happened to EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen. We are not saying that it is going to happen to US President Joe Biden, but this is risky for the US President to go and visit a country in a war. So let's see what happens. For more on this, we are now being joined by our principal diplomatic correspondent, Sidhan Sibol, who is in Israel. Sidhan Sibol, good to see you. I believe you're safe. What's happening around you?
Eric, I'm just perhaps 12 kilometers away from the Gaza border. Now it's evening time, and so we are heading towards Tel Aviv because this part of Israel is not very safe to be in night, and we saw rocket attacks as well, including today where we were. But essentially, when it comes to ground situation, a lot of troop movement, a lot of movement of the tanks as well, soldiers as well. Now the big question remains that whether the Israeli side will launch a ground offensive. That's the big question. But as of now, it looks like a lull as well, because we have seen how there is first the worry over the situation of the hostages. We know that Hamas has released a picture of the hostage as well. And second, of course, the focus on diplomacy with the visit of the US President Joe Biden to Israel.
Sidhan Sibol, you did mention that you're heading back to Tel Aviv. What did you experience in Kiryat Gat? I believe that's where you are now.
Well, right now we're just passing that area, but where I was earlier, just almost 1 hour ago, what I saw was the movement of the tanks. I saw the movement of the artillery as well, the artillery gunfire as well. And if you go towards southern part of Israel, you will see that it is very normal to see artillery firing, rockets being intercepted by the Iron Dome. And essentially, the focus remains that Israel is prepared in case of any eventuality. As of now, diplomacy is something that has been talked about with the visit of the American side. The US Secretary of State Blinken was in Tel Aviv twice. We also saw, of course, the visit of other leaders as well, including the ongoing visit of the German Chancellor. So will diplomacy able to diffuse the ongoing situation is a big question, even as Netanyahu is facing a lot of pressure internally when it comes to whether he will be able to act on Hamas decisively or not. Because if he is seen being lax, then that means a political suicide for him.
All right, that is our principal diplomatic correspondent, Sidhan Sibol in Israel. Sidhan Sibol, thank you and stay safe. Zov Zakaim is a former Undersecretary of Defense in George W. Bush administration and currently senior advisor at Center for Strategic and International Studies. He is now joining us live from Washington, D.C. Zov, welcome to WION The World is One. It will be a trip fraught with risks, like we've said, both political and physical. Physical because no one knows when the rockets will strike. It happened to Blinken. The president has often said he feels very comfortable in Israel. But in your view, are the political risks for Biden difficult to measure at this moment?
Well, thank you for having me. My first name is actually Dov, but that's okay. Look, the president is demonstrating a number of things. First, obviously, his support for Israel. Second, that he has guts. Let's be honest. He's going into a war zone. His Secretary of Defense came under, in effect, rocket attack, and he's going ahead anyway. He's certainly going to prove to the American people that no matter how old he is, it's not stopping him from doing what he thinks is right. I've known the president for a very long time when he was a senator. He's been a strong friend of Israel. And I think that what he will be doing there is not simply telling Netanyahu, we have your back. And of course, by sending out a second aircraft carrier, I should point out that allows the Navy to operate on a 24-hour basis. So he could turn around to Netanyahu and say, I'm going to cover you.
Right.
I'm going to help protect you against Hezbollah and even Iran if necessary. But I need something too. And the world needs something too. We need to know that, as I've quoted General David Petraeus, how is this going to end? They're going to send troops in. They're going to try to rescue hostages. They're going to try to kill Hamas leadership. But that's not enough. You've got millions of people who, frankly, need food, water, electricity, need safety. How is Netanyahu going to deal with that? How is Israel going to deal with that? Can we help Israel? I think those are the questions that Mr. Biden is going to put to Netanyahu to his face.
Indeed.
And he's going to demand an answer.
Dov, let me first apologize by calling you Zov. Dov.
No problem.
Israeli officials have said that it is too early to think about Gaza's future because Hamas must be eliminated first. The visits by Biden are partly intended to force Israeli officials to think about how to go into Gaza without getting stuck there and without being seen as indifferent to the Palestinian civilians. Will America's efforts be fruitful?
Well, I hope so. I think the fact that the President of the United States is making an unprecedented trip, risking his life, let's be honest, he's risking his life in order to make a point. If the Israelis, when they say it's too soon to tell, when I quoted General Petraeus, who happens to be a friend of mine and whom I admire, do you know when he said that? Not in 2009. He said it in 2003 when the Iraq operation just began. Tell me how this ends. Now is the time for Israel to say, this is how we think it's going to end. And there are things Israel must do. It must reassure Palestinians, not just in Gaza, but on the West Bank. It must stop settlement expansion. It must stop infrastructure expansion. It must look after the Arab Israelis that are in dire straits inside the Green Line. There are things Israel can do now. And I think Mr. Biden is going to be telling them that.
All right, Dov, finally, what if Israel proceeds with a ground invasion and the outcome turns disastrous? What impact would that have on the United States?
Well, it'll have a negative impact on us, but it'll have a disastrous impact on Israel. It's mobilized 350 or 360,000 young men and women and older men and women to go in and fight. And if they cannot deliver, that is going to undermine Israel's security deterrent. And frankly, because we're so close to Israel, it's going to undermine our deterrent. So that, I think, is a non-starter. The question is the one you put to me. What does Israel do to ensure that it achieves its fundamental aims, releasing hostages, decapitating Hamas, while at the same time giving Palestinians some kind of hope, immediate relief, and a vision for the future?
All right, I've been talking to Dov Zakhaim, the former Undersecretary of Defense in George W. Bush administration and currently Senior Advisor at Center for Strategic and International Studies. Dov, thank you for talking to WION World is One today.
Thank you for having me.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.